What's up, guys? This is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com. Alongside me is my co-host, Zach Libby. We are back with another Wolverine live recruiting show here exclusively on our YouTube channel. We're on the road to 28,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It is completely free and you get alerts every time we drop new videos. And of course, with the contact period here and coaches out on the road and the Jim Harbaugh situation, you won't want to miss new videos as they drop on the YouTube channel. Could be breaking news one way or the other. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and also like this video. It helps us get in front of other Michigan fans. Zach, how are you doing tonight?
It's recruiting never stops, right? It's coaches are on the road, and it felt you mentioned this in a group text earlier today. It felt like 0 to 100 today. So excited to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about coaches on the road in a little while. We'll start off with the Jim Harbaugh situation and how it's affecting recruiting. But before we do that, we actually have a message from our sponsor tonight, and that is Leonard Financial Solutions. Leonard Financial Solutions founder Jonathan Leonard wants to listen to you to get to know your story and how he can best help you. People often hesitate to contact a financial advisor because they think they have to know what they want first. Leonard Financial Solutions founder Jonathan Leonard will start with you at square one, getting to know you and your unique situation. You don't want to outlive your retirement money. You don't want to make risky investments. You don't want your loved ones to experience financial insecurity. Leonard Financial Solutions wants to alleviate your fears by providing you with options for life insurance, income protection, retirement income, safe annuities, and Medicare. They take the time to explain the pros and cons of each product and will not rush you through the decision-making process. So when's the best time to sit down with a financial advisor? The answer is now. Whether you are just starting out, hoping to retire the next 5 years, or already retired, Leonard Financial Solutions wants to help you make smart decisions about your money. Get the expert financial advice without the high-pressure sales pitch. Reach out to get started today at www.leonardfs.com. or call 856-444-LIFE for a free consultation. Again, that's www.leonardfs.com or call 856-444-LIFE. All right, thanks to Leonard Financial Solutions for helping us put on today's show. Like I said in our little chat box there on our staff account, leave a super chat tonight to get a question answered. Tonight is not the Q&A show, so if you do want a question answered tonight, make sure to leave a super chat. That money goes directly to our travel budget so we can see recruits across the country. All right, everybody wants to know about Jim Harbaugh. We are not here to report the latest on the Jim Harbaugh situation. That is for our team guys, Chris Ballas, who's doing a fantastic job over on the Wolverine, covering the saga along with fellow beat reporters Anthony Broom and Clayton Safey. So if you want the actual juice on what's going on with Harbaugh, head over to the Wolverine.com right now for just $1 for 1 month. We're going to talk about Jim Harbaugh and the recruiting impact. Obviously, Harbaugh had an interview with the Los Angeles Chargers on Monday. A couple hours later, you had Chris Ewald decommit. You know, this isn't our first rodeo with Harbaugh and his NFL aspirations. Obviously, we've been through it the last few cycles, and it always hinders Michigan a bit, especially as recruiting cycles are more accelerated and sped up. You're seeing classes become almost full by the end of June. So, with the contact period being here, and the dead period ending or starting again on February 5th, there's a limited time to get underclassmen in and really build off the momentum of winning a national championship. Zach, on your side, from talking to kids and just from what you've been able to gather, how much of a negative impact do you think the Harbaugh to NFL situation is having on Michigan recruiting?
I mean, obviously, the short-term momentum a week or so after the national championship, that is all halted on the recruiting trail. If Harbaugh got extended or had an extension already, the coaches wouldn't have to be on the road answering questions about the future. The recruits and families don't have to think about the future and what it could be without Jim Harbaugh there. I mean, you already saw the implications of what an unknown is like with, as you mentioned, top 100 quarterback Chris Eball decommitting. But I mean, let's say Harbaugh leaves. The next steps have to be having continuity in the program, and that starts with promoting Sherrone Moore. You have to, like I mentioned, keep the culture, the operation, the everything that was put into winning a national championship. That can be done by having a coach like Sherrone Moore as head coach, who was already acting head coach for 4 games, and then having as many assistants come back as possible. Um, you know, we know as a head coach, Sherrone Moore has on-field results with 4-0 last season, but I don't think people really truly don't know what he can do in recruiting. I mean, 5 signees in the 2024 class, one of them in the top 100 in Adrian Sprague. Um, his success with bringing so many 2025 targets on the offensive line for the Ohio State game, his connections in areas like Chicago, one of his main recruiting areas. I mean, if you want someone like Sherrone Moore, he's young, right? And he's relatable. And I feel like that's the direction that most head coaches are becoming in college football. You see it like with Dillingham and Arizona State, or Ryan Walters at Purdue, or Freeman and Notre Dame. You want coaches like Sherrone Moore who can build relationships off the field and aren't just teachers of the game. They're also just mentors and friends even. So um, it shouldn't really be a shock too, that all these recruits want to play for young coaches. And I feel like for Sherrone, who's under 40 years old, he can be in that category. But overall, you just have to have some continuity moving forward. If Jim Harbaugh, the leader of the program, leaves, you can have the guy uh, already seasoned to lead a program like Michigan to the 2024 season.
Yeah, on my end, I think it's, like I said, it's not our first rodeo. And, I've obviously been at the Wolverine a little longer than Zach. And, it's kind of an every year thing. And especially these past 3 years, you had Michigan make the college football playoff, and they didn't really capitalize on that as Harbaugh almost left to go coach the Minnesota Vikings. And then last year, they made the playoff again, and once again didn't capitalize as Harbaugh was flirting with the Broncos. Now you win the national championship, and once again you're failing to capitalize on momentum as Harbaugh is interviewing with the Los Angeles Chargers. So every time I say Chargers, I want to call them the San Diego Chargers. But anyway, now Harbaugh's talking to the Chargers, and you're kind of in a state of limbo. You didn't have any recruits come in this past weekend to experience the national championship parade and the celebration. I feel like you could have at least gotten some local kids, some Midwest kids in to kind of get that feeling of excitement. And now every time that the coaches go on the road, which again, we'll talk about the coaches hitting on the road here in a second. Every time you have the coaches go on the road, it's not like, it's the focus isn't on completely on the national championship, what you did on the field. The focus is more so, that's great, you guys just won a national championship. Now tell me about Jim Harbaugh. Is he staying or is he leaving? That's going to be the conversation basically anywhere you stop. Now, the good news is I did spend some time talking to recruits over the last week or so about the whole situation. And for the most part, there's a lot of support when it comes to the guys already on staff, specifically Sherrone Moore. Zach talked about it a little bit here. If you lose Harbaugh and you quickly pivot to Sherrone Moore, you can maybe rebuild some of that momentum. There's already familiarity with a ton of recruits, and the likelihood of the staff, or most of the staff, staying intact, obviously goes higher than bringing in a new head coach who will want his guys in. Like, for example, today I spoke to Dan Smith, father of Michigan quarterback commit Carter Smith, just a couple of hours ago before we started up this show. And, we were talking about Carter training and some different things like that. But Kirk Campbell was at his school today. And so obviously the Harbaugh situation came up, and he said, look, if Michigan goes to Sherrone Moore, we're still all in. We're completely fine. Sharon is not that big of a drop off from Harbaugh in our eyes. And on top of that, you likely keep Kurt Campbell. And Kurt Campbell was instrumental in closing with Carter Smith. Remember, Campbell took the opposite approach of Matt Weiss and didn't do the all your eggs in one basket. He said, I'm going to take Carter Smith right now, even when Bryce Underwood was uncommitted, right? So there's a big trust in Kurt Campbell, and there's also a trust in Sharon Moore when it comes to Carter Smith. So if they pivot to Moore, there's no reason to worry about losing your quarterback commit. There's no reason to worry about losing your tight end commit, Eli Owens. When I talked to Eli last week, before Harbaugh was interviewing with the Chargers, I asked him, if Harbaugh does flirt with the NFL as expected, is that going to affect your commitment? Why commit now knowing that's a possibility? And he was like, man, I'm committing to Michigan because one, I love Michigan, but two, I have full trust in Sharon Moore. And I also talked to Eli's mother, Kendall, and she's told me the same thing. She's like, look, every year we have the Harbaugh situation. He never leaves. But on the off chance he does leave, then you have Sharon Moore, and we're fully confident in him. So, the commits are confident. I'm sure Bobby Kanka feels the same way. The commits are very confident in Sharon Moore if it comes to that situation. And then from the offensive side of the ball, as far as targets go, obviously Moore knows all the offensive line guys. He's the primary recruiter for all of them. But I think, you've had more familiarity with other positions as well, skill players. You've seen Gatlin Bear talk more and more about Sharon Moore becoming more and more involved in his recruiting process. The relationship is still there with Ron Bellamy. If Moore stays, Bellamy's not going anywhere. He's a Michigan man through and through. And Bellamy was out in Idaho today seeing Bear. The defensive side of the ball, look, it's going to be shaky about keeping Minter, but if you're able to keep Steve Klingscale, that's still your primary recruiter for the biggest target in 2025, DJ Pickett, and Klingscale is down seeing Pickett today. So, overall, I think losing Harbaugh hurts. You can't, it's going to be hard to replace a guy that's basically, a living legend, one of the best coaches in the game, whether it's college or pro. But at the same time, you already have a guy on staff, once again, that has the familiarity, has the personality, and can be a really good recruiter as a head coach. I've kind of likened to, fans have asked me on the Wolverine, what can we expect of Sharon Moore as a recruiter? And I've kind of said, if he's a head coach, and I've kind of said he can be very similar to what Marcus Freeman is at Notre Dame. Now, the jury's still out on whether Marcus Freeman can actually coach, but he can definitely recruit, right? Notre Dame's not winning anything of significance. They suck and they're lame, but he can recruit. He's still getting guys to a really lame-ass program. So I think Sharon Moore has the advantage of having a great program in Michigan coming off a national championship and still has similarities with Freeman as a recruiter. So I think that's what you can expect out of Sharon Moore if he is the guy. Now, anything else you want to add to that, Zach, or anything else you want to add as far as what we can expect the rest of the week?
I feel like we're just going to see coaches getting on the road like the rest of the country has gone, and whether or not junior day visits happen, and we'll see what the weekends transpire these next 3 weeks, but we'll see how many recruits show up to campus and which recruits show up to campus.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, is look, right now Harbaugh is not on the road. It'll be interesting to see if he does hit the road because, during the initial winter contact period, so in December before we had the dead period, Harbaugh made a number of in-home visits, but there's still several 2024 signees that have yet to have their in-home visit with Harbaugh. So they're kind of waiting and seeing if Harbaugh is going to come to their house. You had Luger Adekpayi obviously commit really late. And I think that's a kid that didn't get a Harbaugh in-home. I know Devin Baxter didn't get a Harbaugh in home. So, you have Manuel Bagel didn't get a Harbaugh. So there's a lot of, guys out there that haven't gotten their Harbaugh in home yet. So curious to see if he actually hits the road or if there's a quick turnaround one way or the other on whether he's staying or going to the NFL. That's the most interesting part to me, is how quickly will we know if he's going to the NFL or if he's staying at Michigan? Because if it is a quick turnaround one way or the other, like I said, you can pivot to more and maybe keep some momentum, maybe get some guys in the last couple of weekends. If he's staying, then that's great. You can go back to business as usual, and the NFL flirtations were limited. But I think ideally it happens really fast one way or the other, like by the end of the week. So that would be my hope, ideally, if, just as a reporter, and also, if you're a Michigan fan, I'm sure you want this done sooner rather than later. Let's go ahead and go over to our next topic, and that is Michigan hitting the recruiting trail. The coaches were back on the road. The contact period is here, so somebody has to go out and recruit. And like I said, Ron Bellamy on the road in Idaho, seeing Gatlin Bair, a prospect Zach and I are very familiar with. Let's talk about Gatlin for a bit. Zach, obviously Oregon sent their wide receivers coach to see Gatlin. I believe it was late last week or Monday. I'm not sure, one of these last few days. Oregon's wide receivers coach was there. Bellamy followed that up by coming in today. How are you feeling about Gatlin right now?
I mean, it really depends on the situation with Harbaugh. Depends on how you're feeling with Gatlin Bair. Because I feel like those go hand in hand at this point. We all know, or most of everyone knows, that Gatlin Bair is a 26 recruit, 2026. So he won't enroll for 2 years. With that, I feel like if you're going to commit in his situation, if you're going to commit in a month, you kind of want to know the idea of like the situation that you're going to end up in 2 years, like an exact blueprint of what's going to happen at a certain school. When it comes to Michigan, the situation with Harbaugh, who not let alone he won't be here for 2024, but he certainly wouldn't be there for 2026 if he left for the Chargers. It all goes back to when Gatlin visited Michigan for the second time for the Ohio State game. They had a meeting, him and his close circle had a meeting with Harbaugh, and Harbaugh was very upfront and honest about just not knowing the future. But his close circle is also talked to the Wolverine and yourself and about just the school backing up Sharon Moore as the head coach. And, I feel like Michigan is the leader, but with Oregon making such a heavy push and its head coach committing to the Oregon Ducks after him being linked to Alabama for 48 hours, Dan Lanning, I think unless Harbaugh's on staff, Gatlin's not going to end up in Ann Arbor. But I guess that's the risk of committing to a school, and then not the risk of not going on a 2-year mission and then committing to a school, right? There's the possibility of having a different staff, a different operation, a different culture. And, there's a certain scenarios that could play out on February 7th for that traditional signing period. Like, will Harbaugh make the decision before Bair, or will that flip-flop? Will Harbaugh leave before Bair makes a decision? At that point, you kind of feel like Oregon is in the forefront. If Harbaugh stays, then you feel more confident that Michigan can land an Olympic trial-worthy track runner, the number 11 overall wide receiver in the 2024 class. But if Harbaugh ponders more, you feel like the sure thing is Oregon, just because of continuity with the coaching staff under Dan Lanning. So there's a lot of what ifs at this point in such little time, right? Because it's less than a month till February 7th. So I feel like Bair's decision will be more clear based on what Harbaugh does with his own career.
Yeah, I would assume that Harbaugh makes his decision before Bair, since signing day isn't until the 7th. But who knows how long this will take, and if things don't work out with the Chargers, are there other NFL options out there? Did the Raiders come into the picture? They've been kind of rumored to be hanging around, sort of. So, I'm not. I don't know. I think with Gatlin, if Sharon Moore is the guy, at least there's a sense of familiarity there. I mentioned earlier in the show that Gatlin has talked about how Moore has been increasingly involved in his recruitment. Obviously, the relationship with Bellamy is there. I think if Harbaugh stays and shows a commitment to being at Michigan long term, I still feel like Michigan wins this recruitment. If Harbaugh leaves, I think those chances go down. But if Sharon is the guy, then there is still a legitimate chance. Now, I obviously had a chance to spend time with Gatlin down in San Antonio earlier this month, and I think his preference is to pick Michigan. If Harbaugh, if there were no uncertainty with Harbaugh, I wouldn't have been surprised if Bear would have picked Michigan during the early period. Now, this whole situation and Michigan being really focused on the on-field stuff. Remember, the last few weeks they've been fully locked in on the Rose Bowl and the national championship, so they weren't recruiting as much, and that kind of allowed Oregon to really make a strong push in this recruitment. I think Oregon has made up a ton of ground, and so it wouldn't surprise me to see him end up picking the Ducks either. I think right now it's kind of just wait and see mode with Bear. I feel like today's visit with Bellamy went really, really well. And Coach Anderson, the head coach at Burley High School, who's been serving as a great mentor to Gatlin and was Colston Loveland's high school head coach, put out a tweet today or tonight just talking about how big of an impact Bellamy made on his stop today, going over film, going over the offense and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like everything's still there for Michigan. It really just depends on, how this situation plays out over the next few weeks. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the other guys that Michigan saw on the recruiting trail today. I'll start first, Zach. Five-star safety DJ Pickett, you have to start with him. I mean, Steve Klinkscale was down in the state of Florida. Seeing Pickett earlier today, offered one of his teammates in the 2027 class as well. Look, Pickett remains the most important prospect in the 2025 class, the most important guy on the board right now. He has so many ties to Michigan. His mom went to Michigan. He's had, relatives that have worked at Michigan. His brother went to Eastern. His grandmother still lives in the Detroit metro. So just on and on as far as connections to the university. He's been there a bazillion times. His mom is very pro Michigan, and I think his dad is really starting to buy in as well. I think the thing with DJ is, the relationship with Steve Klinkscale is so strong. And I don't think Klink is really going anywhere unless, Michigan brings in an entire, a different head coach, obviously. If it's not Sharon Moore, if they bring in a different head coach and Harbaugh doesn't stick around, then, maybe things get interesting there. But, if Moore's the guy, I mean, Klink's hanging around, right? I mean, his son just accepted a preferred walk-on spot at the University of Michigan. So obviously that helps. I mean, he's expecting it to be there long-term. And I think that's the pitch to Pickett is, you still have all these ties to Michigan. I'm still going to be your coach. You still have the opportunity to come in and make an early impact for the defending national champs. So, with Pickett, he's not just the number one safety in the country. He also has the flexibility to play corner. And obviously there's a need for corner as well. And even more so now with Chris Ewald decommitting. So, I still think Michigan has a really legitimate shot with Pickett. I know everybody's going to talk about NIL, but I think Pickett, if there was a 5-star out there that I think would spurn some NIL dollars, my bet would be on Pickett. So, we'll see. I know there are NIL powerhouses involved like Oregon and Miami. Alabama and Georgia were the other two schools that made his top 5. So that's all really scary. But I think that Pickett has a great support system. I think the ties, his mother being, someone that attended Michigan, I think that really, really helps the Wolverines' efforts. Kurt Campbell is down in Florida as well, seeing on 300 quarterback commit Carter Smith. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, I had a really good conversation with Carter's dad earlier. They're locked in, they're fully supportive of Sharon Moore if he is the guy. And I just want to say that, Campbell loves Carter Smith. I mean, this is their guy. I know everybody's still, kind of butthurt about missing out on Bryce Underwood, but I feel like Carter is a guy that the staff is just really, really high on. They love his attitude. The thing that I get continuously from the Michigan side about Carter is we love his makeup. We love his makeup, that mental makeup of just fitting the culture. And, Carter has a ton of athletic ability as well. He's an amazing runner. Obviously, he still has work to do as a pure passer, but he's starting to work with a quarterback coach for the first time. I mean, he has a ton of upside, and I think Kirk Campbell really buys into what Carter can become. Really quick, Grant Newsom was out in the Appalachia territory, seeing kind of middle of nowhere, seeing Marshall Pritchett, tight end out at Raven Gap, northeast corner of Georgia. And look, Michigan just landed Eli Owens. I think Pritchett is a guy that's a candidate to join him. Just think Michigan in his top 10, and I think Michigan's definitely in that top half. Now, speaking of Sharon Moore, he was actually out west, going all the way out to Phoenix to see Logan Powell, a name that Michigan fans don't talk about often. But Zach, you've been down in Phoenix seeing family, and you've had a chance to visit Logan Powell. Tell Michigan fans why they should know about Logan Powell.
I mean, as a player, he's just your prototypical Michigan offensive lineman. Like, he is the definition of just a grinded out mentality. He transferred to his current school during the seasons, right before the season, actually. So he couldn't play. He had a suspension. So during that suspension, he was able to learn multiple positions in practice. So he has a versatility. But from a Michigan connection standpoint, I mean, he's a legacy. His grandfather and great uncle graduated from the university. His mom's side of the family are originally from Ann Arbor. Like, his mom was born there. They moved to Phoenix a while back, and there's still family living in Ann Arbor right now. They, for recruiting, I mean, obviously Powell has been to Southeast Michigan plenty of times, but for Michigan visits, he's been there twice, and most recently for the Purdue game in November. That was the first time some of his family were able to see a Michigan game. And it's the night game. The lights were on. It's a Big Ten rival. All the sign stealing allegations were at its peak drama, I would say. So, 110,000 people, certain people like Logan's dad, who's the pitching coach for the Florida Marlins organization, AAA, just for a whole family that's in sports, just taken back by the atmosphere and the hoorah and the camaraderie of just having so many people in one setting to watch a football game. That really impressed them. I would imagine that the next time that Logan Powell comes back to Ann Arbor for recruiting reasons would be for an official visit in the offseason. Now there's USC that's in the picture as well, because Logan went out there to Los Angeles for a game, and then Arizona State, which is 45 minutes away from where Logan Powell attends school. They are trying really hard to keep everyone in its backyard home. But, I think it just goes back to the Sharon Moore case for a head coach. Guys like Logan Powell, you kind of solidify yourself still as a top contender for a Logan Powell if Sharon Moore is a head coach. Regardless of who coaches offensive line, you have an offensive line-minded head coach who played offensive line in college. So guys like Logan Powell, I see no issues in continuing to recruit and continuing to show interest, especially for him, who has a special situation, having roots there. So he is one that I have implored Michigan fans to follow, not just for everything that I've mentioned with his legacy status, but just him as a football player. I think him and finishing blocks and having that mauling attitude, I think that just fits Michigan's offensive line so well.
Zach, you're getting cooked in the comments. Adam Shepardson says, does Zach's facial hair look crooked to anyone else?
Look,
wow, Zach.
Look, I don't know what's going on with this camera, but I have looked in the mirror before he went on, and I'm like, this is not crooked, but it's it looks crooked now. I
Wow. All right. Well, Zach doesn't know how to shave. He needs some help. But anyway, look at my straight little tiny patch of hair here.
I
Anyway, let's talk about Chris Ewald decommitting. We are running low on time. We've actually passed the time limit. So if you have a super chat, make sure to get it in. So since we are running low on time here, Zach, just very quick reaction to Chris Ewald backing out of the class. And for those of you that don't know, top 100 cornerback, has been committed to Michigan for more than a year. Chris Ewald backed out of his pledge last night. What was your reaction?
I mean, as you mentioned, top 100 recruit, a kid in that category, you're going to command recruiting NIL. Michigan just continues to struggle recruiting top 100 kids, and they're going to continue doing so until an NIL plan is passed or initiated or set forth in motion. You have to rival these schools like Miami or an A&M or an Oregon or a USC or Florida State. You don't have to go from 0 to 100, but as a reporter watching fans' reactions to all this these past 24 hours, I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to think like a national champion can't compete on the recruiting trail for something as simple as NIL. That has to be fixed in some way, or form, in order for this, for this not to be a regular thing for Michigan moving forward.
I can't get past Zach's facial hair either. It does look at Zach getting cut. It does look crooked. Like it looks really slanted now that Adam Shepardson brought that up and other people are taking note. Now Zach puts his hand here. he's like no. But yeah, that does look like it's kind of cut at an angle. It looks very, very odd.
I shaved today. I swear to you, I'm not. I'm good with the razor. I've been doing this for years. I don't know what's going on.
I think Zach needs to have a barber come in and professionally shave his face. All right. Like I said, we're running low on time. We have 124 people watching, so we should have 124 likes. Make sure to like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. And also make sure to subscribe to the Wolverine for $1 for 1 month, where you can get an inside look at Chris Ewald's decommitment. Look, I spent some time on the phone last night with Ewald's dad, and there was a lot that we discussed. So you can head over to thewolverine.com and kind of get a summary. But, I think two things here. Obviously, Harbaugh looking around doesn't help. And also Michigan not having the NIL plan in place doesn't help either. Something that Ewald's father mentioned to me was, we talked about Empower when we were on campus in the summer. And remember, Empower was this massive movement. Jim Harbaugh was going around and making tours and doing presentations. I know he was in Chicago and some other cities, really pushing Empower. And then, I hadn't even thought about Empower, to be honest with you, until Ewald's dad mentioned it. And I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing, Empower. And I called Zach and I was like, hey, have you heard of Empower? Have like any recruits mentioned Empower to you since August? And then I went to Empower's Twitter account and it was like, no tweets since August. And then I asked Chris Ballas, our football writer, I was like, hey dude, is Empower still a thing? And he was like, I don't know. And it wasn't until our other writer, Clayton Safey, researched it, and Empower was actually advertised recently on some type of platform where Michigan was promoting the national championship win. But the point being is that was supposed to be big for recruiting because it was supposed to bring a base salary model along with it, so you would have guarantees. And that was something that the Ewald family, and I'm sure a lot of families that visited in the summer, were looking forward to. And now you haven't heard a peep about Empower. And so there's already no real NIL plan in place from a recruiting perspective. Obviously, Michigan did a lot of fundraising with the One More Year Fund, and you have guys like Donovan Edwards and Makari Page and so forth returning for another year. But Empower was something that was supposed to help with recruiting, and it's just been non-existent, from a recruiting perspective. So, I think with the NIL not being there and Harbaugh flirting with the NFL, it's going to be tough to land top 100 guys, especially top 100 guys out of region. But, specifically to Ewald, I had more on that over at thewolverine.com. So make sure to subscribe for $1 for 1 month. Hopefully, look, Zach having really second thoughts about his facial hair. He's like pulling on it. He's like, oh no, what did I get myself into? So shout out to Adam Shepardson for destroying Zach on tonight's show and making him feel terrible about himself. He's going to go drown in his sorrows and eat Little Caesars. I will be back tomorrow to answer all your questions here exclusively on our YouTube channel at 7 Eastern. So I'll see you tomorrow. Zach will see you next week, and he'll be completely shaven.